Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. You're watching the NCERT Foundation series wherein we study the subject of political science or polity with the help of MCQs and PYQs wherever relevant. So without further ado, let's plunge right in. Now as always, I have brought for you a quick glance at what we are going to be covering today. Today we are going to be covering chapter 3 of your class 10 NCERT, which is titled Gender, Religion and Caste, and we are going to study the role of gender, religion and caste in democratic politics. Now these are some of the subdivisions that we are going to be covering with the help of questions today, and this about sums up your entire chapter. Alright, so let's begin with the previous day question. Coalition governments in India since the 1990s have contributed to federalism by. Now remember, in the preceding lecture we talked about federalism, which is a form of vertical power sharing, wherein there are different levels of governance. But in federalism, we are talking about a parity in power sharing between the center and states. There is a parity, and these powers or the subject matters of each, the domain of each, are specified by the constitution. They are constitutionally guaranteed. So let's take a look at the first statement. Centralizing power through frequent use of Article 356. Notice the term centralizing power. This is absolutely contradictory to what we are studying. We are talking about power sharing, right? Wherein the powers of all levels of government are specified and they are sharing power instead of concentrating power. The fundamental principle of power sharing is to avoid concentration of power. So this seems to be in violation of federalism. B. Fostering alliances with regional parties leading to greater state autonomy and reduced arbitrary dismissals of state government. So this, of course, talks about fostering alliances and providing greater state autonomy, which means some sort of a decentralization. All right. Now, before 1990s, there was indeed arbitrary dismissals of state governments by imposing Article 356 or President's Rule on the grounds that state governments are unable to function, according to the Constitution. But since 1994, there was a very important case, a landmark judgment in the S.R. Bommai versus the Union of India case, where the Supreme Court ruled that the President's rule is not immune from judicial scrutiny and that state governments cannot be dismissed arbitrarily, but that they must test majority or confidence on the floor. All right. So this is actually correct. C. Eliminating the need for judicial oversight in center-state relations. No, judicial oversight still exists, and it is the result of judicial oversight that we had this judgment. D. Uniformly applying Hindi as the language across coalitions. No, we are talking about federalism here. So federalism is going to be more accommodative instead of being exclusive and imposing. So in this case, if you are federal, if you believe in the principle of power sharing, and if you believe in parity of power sharing between center and states, then you cannot unilaterally impose Hindi on all states or across coalitions. So your correct answer is option B. Question 1 from today's chapter. The term sexual division of labor refers to. Now this indicates that there is definitely some sort of division of labor, and that division is gendered. All right. gendered, which means sexual division of labor is basically a socially constructed system. It refers to a socially constructed system wherein men are usually assigned more productive or economic. I'm using the term productive very loosely here, but let's say men are assigned economic and outdoor activities, whereas women are relegated to the household and caregiving activities. All right? Household and caregiving activities. Notice how I use the term socially constructed. It means that these are based on certain societal norms, most likely patriarchal norms, and not based on biology or law or the constitution. All right. So on the basis of this information, let's check the options out. The first statement says equal distribution of work between men and women. Does this refer to sexual division of labor? No. On the contrary, it refers to what gender equality ideally must be. That there should be an equal division of labor irrespective of the gender. B. Division of work based on biological differences. So we just discussed that these differences are not based on biology. Are we denying that there are biological differences between men and women? No, certainly there are biological differences. But is the division of labor based on those differences? Absolutely not. It is basically based on certain patriarchal principles. All right? C. System where women are confined to household work while men engage in outside work. This is absolutely correct. And this is precisely what we studied when we talked about division of labor. And D. Legal segregation of workers by gender. Now, there is no such law that confines men and women or compartmentalizes men and women to work in certain domains. There is no law that restricts the working of one gender or the other. So, we have the correct answer, which is option number C. Which of the following acts provides for equal wages for equal work for men and women? Now, there are certain acts right here, and from the very look of it, it's a very straightforward answer, which is option D, Equal Remuneration Act of 1976. Now, there's also the Factories Act of 1948. What does it do? It talks about the health, safety, and welfare of workers of a factory. But it does not talk about equal wage for equal work. The Code on Wages 2019 actually was compiled very recently, and it subsumed this law along with Payments of Wages Act and so on. All right. This law was subsumed under this. But the original standalone law for equality in remuneration was this act. Then there is also the Minimum Wages Act of 1948. Of course, it guarantees that certain minimum wages be provided to all workers. However, it does not guarantee that equal wages be provided for equal work to men and women. All right. So, we have our correct answer, which is option D. Question third, consider the following about women's political representation in India. 1. Women constitute more than 25% of the Lok Sabha. This is factually incorrect. As of 2024, Lok Sabha, the 18th Lok Sabha, there are approx 13.6% women in the Lok Sabha. All right. There are 13.6 MPs in the Lok Sabha. Now, in the preceding Lok Sabha, the number was 14.4. So we can't even claim that this figure is consistently improving or consistently increasing, all right? It is fluctuating. 25 would have been a good number, but we are far from that, at least as of now. And hopefully, the steps that are being taken, the laws that are being brought in is going to work well. 2. Panchayati Raj Institutions reserve 1/3 seats for women. This is factually correct. And with the help of the 73rd and 74th Amendments, this law or this provision was brought in. Third, Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam 2023 extends reservation to state assemblies. Yes, again, this is factually correct. It extends these reservations of 33% to Parliament, state assemblies, as well as the Legislative Assembly of Delhi. Okay. However, this law, this act is going to be effective after the census is conducted and then the delimitation exercise is conducted. All right. This will happen after around 2026. So, we have the first option, first statement, which is wrong and which we can conveniently eliminate and arrive at our correct answer, which is option B. Consider the following features of secularism in India. Now, what do we understand about secularism? In the most simple terms, if we talk about secularism, then we can say that it is the principled separation between religion and state. So basically, it is a separation between state and religion. State does not interfere in matters of religion. Notice that I use the term interfere and not intervene. State might intervene, at least in the case of India, not in all secular countries or not in all secular democracies. They follow absolute separation of church and state. But in India, we follow this definition, which is principled distance from all religions. All right. Now, let's say no official religion of the state. This is correct. Unlike, let's say, in Pakistan or in UK, Pakistan has Islam as its state religion and England has Christianity as its state religion. We do not have an official religion. So, this is correct. Second, state treats all religions equally. Absolutely correct again. We provide freedom of religion in Articles 25 to 28, wherein equality is also implied. However, please notice that whenever we talk about prohibition of discrimination, Article 15, we realize that the Constitution also provides for the prohibition of discrimination on the basis of religion. Also, there is no preference given to any religion altogether, which means the statement stands correct. 3. State has no authority to reform social practices. Now, this is where I would like to use the term intervention. There is principled intervention, just like there is principled distance. Why do I use the term principled intervention? Because if there are certain practices in certain religions that are violating the constitutional qualities or the basic constitutional features, like, let's say, equality, liberty, or even dignity. If there are certain provisions or certain practices in any religion which are violating basic constitutional qualities, basic constitutional features, then the state has the right to intervene and reform, as we saw in the case of removal of untouchability, abolition of untouchability, as well as in the ban on triple talaq. I beg your pardon. So, this statement stands eliminated. Now, the fourth statement says freedom of religion is guaranteed as a fundamental right. So, yes, of course, we have just talked about it. It is indeed guaranteed in Articles 25 to 28 in our Constitution. So, now that we have eliminated option 3, statement 3, we can quickly rule out all options which has statement 3 and arrive at our correct answer, which in this case happens to be option A. Communalism as a political ideology assumes that. Now let's quickly try to understand what communalism is. We talked about secularism and we talked about how it is in the most basic terms a separation of religion or church in the West from state. All right, this is what we talked about, secularism. Now, communalism is actually the exact opposite, which means here in communalism, the religion is considered as the very fundamental basis of a state or a community. Think of Pakistan. When they wished for separation from India, their main basis was religion. All right. So here, religion forms the basis of social community. Now that community could be a nation state as well. Another important feature of communalism is that communalists consider all similarities among all the people of the same religion to be fundamental. They consider that their interests are primarily similar, whereas whatever differences there are, they are irrelevant. So if I belong to religion X and you belong to religion X, whatever we have in common is what is important, and our interests, our beneficial interests are what we should be focusing on. All right. If you and I have any differences whatsoever in preferences, then those differences do not matter. They're irrelevant and they are trivial. This is what the ideology of communalism proposes. So, people belonging to same religion have same interests. This is the assumption of communalism. Same interests. And if there are any differences, those are irrelevant or trivial. Any differences are trivial or they do not matter. Now, what else? They also feel that people from different religions are fundamentally different. Their interests are also different. And any similarities that they have are superficial. They are superficial. All right. So, people from different religions are fundamentally different in terms of their interests. They cannot have common interests. They cannot have common interests. And if there are any similarities, then those are absolutely superficial. Similarities are superficial, which are eventually going to cause conflict. So this is also a firm belief of communalism as a political ideology, that even if you and I have similar interests, but we belong to different religions, our interests are ultimately going to diverge and we are going to have a conflict. Hence, people belonging from different religions cannot work together and form a nation. We cannot work together equal. We cannot be treated equally as equal citizens. That is the whole idea about communalism. All right. I hope this is clear. So let's say, what does communalism have to say? That religion is purely private. No, this is not what we studied about communalism. It does not. In fact, it says that religion is the only basis for any kind of community. So it is not talking about religion being private. B, all religions must merge into one. No, it is not talking about inclusivity, but rather exclusivity. So it is not talking about any kind of homogeneity or inclusivity. C, states should have no role in regulating religion. This is a core principle of secularism in general, not in the context of India, but in general. Let me write that also. Especially in the West, not in India. D, interests of followers of one religion are identical and opposed to others. So this is actually correct. According to communalism, the interests of followers, so if religion 1 has 1, 2, 3, 4 followers and religion 2 has 1, 2, 3, 4 followers, then these, according to communalists, these have the same interests. These have the same interests, but they cannot have common interest. On the contrary, their interests are opposed or conflicting with each other. That is the whole idea. So with this, we come to our correct answer, which is option D. Question 6, assertion, caste continues to influence electoral politics in India. R, or reason, every parliamentary constituency in India is dominated by a single caste group. Now first, let's look at the assertion and let's determine whether this is correct. Caste continues to influence electoral politics in India. Yes, this is absolutely correct. Even if we see contemporary politics, we're talking about contemporary politics, you know how candidates are fielded by various political parties. Of course, caste is taken into that calculation. So every time a political party thinks about fielding a candidate from any constituency, they do take caste as a matter of consideration. Another thing that you'll notice is during campaigning, caste is actually evoked. So the leaders or the candidates do try to influence the masses or the people of the constituency to vote on the basis of caste. That does happen, especially if there is a majority dominating in one constituency, which usually does happen. At times it does happen that there is a majority caste which dominates one constituency. So yes, this assertion is absolutely correct, even in terms of contemporary politics. Reason says every parliamentary constituency in India is dominated by a single caste. First of all, we did discuss this in preceding sessions as well. Watch out for exclusive, absolute terms. Every, all, none. So no. And think about it logically as well. Not all parliamentary constituencies can be dominated by a single caste group. Alright? First of all, this assertion itself is wrong. Second of all, even if there was a domination of any caste group in one constituency, the leader or the leader who wishes to be the elected representative, the candidate of election, would still have to win the confidence of all castes and not just one. Not just one caste or not just the majority. Also, sometimes it so happens, and not sometimes, I may belong to a particular caste, but it does not guarantee that I'm still going to vote for the person who belongs to my caste. All right. So not everybody from that caste is going to vote for the very same candidate. Also, if a candidate wishes to win elections, that candidate will have to win the confidence of electors from all castes and not just his or her own caste. So this reasoning is wrong on multiple levels. So we can say that the assertion is true, but the reasoning is false. And we have option C as our correct answer. Caste politics has a positive impact when? So this is again a very pleasant part of caste politics, that it may also have a positive impact, and it's also a fairly straightforward question. If we look at all the options, it suppresses minority caste demands. Of course, if it suppresses, it's not a positive impact. It allows disadvantaged groups to demand a fair share in power. So this absolutely is our answer. It ensures domination of one caste over others. Of course not. It diverts attention from issues like poverty. No, also not. These are not positive impacts. The only one positive impact is the representation of disadvantaged groups in political setup. So option B is the correct answer. Question 8. Which of the following differentiates caste inequalities from gender and religious inequalities? So caste is very peculiar to our own country, and it is basically a hierarchical division of labor, which is rigid, fixed and hereditary in nature. All right. And this system is very unique to India. It is not found in a lot of other countries, particularly in the West. So let's look at the options. A, they are legally sanctioned by the Constitution. See, whenever we are talking about inequalities, whether they are caste-based or gender or religion-based, we cannot believe or we cannot come to imagine that they will be sanctioned by the Constitution. So no, inequalities are never going to be sanctioned by the Constitution unless they involve some sort of a preferential differential treatment or some sort of an affirmative action. So we can rule this out. B, they are unique to India with hereditary occupational divisions, which is absolutely correct. You do not find such divisions in other parts of the world. Of course, in a few countries that have been influenced, perhaps in like probably our neighboring country of Pakistan, there could be some caste-based politics, but otherwise there is no existence of caste elsewhere. They are based on universal differences across societies. So no. What differences are universal across societies? The differences of gender and religion. These differences are universal across societies, whether in East or in West. Caste, like we just said, is very peculiar to India. D, they have disappeared in modern India. Absolutely not. Caste inequalities or caste divisions still persist, especially and particularly in rural India, but also in urban India. All right. So, the correct answer is option B. Question 9. Consider the following about communalism. We have studied about communalism in detail just a few minutes ago. So, we should be able to answer this. 1. It assumes interest of one religion are opposed to another. Absolutely correct. They assume that interests of these two religions are mutually exclusive, that there can be no overlap, right? That there can be no overlap, and if there is any overlap or any similarity, then that is superficial, immaterial and inconsequential to our cause. So this is correct. It may lead to majoritarian dominance. It may absolutely lead to majoritarian dominance, especially if one religion is in absolute majority, then there is absolutely a chance that they may try to suppress the minority religion. Again, notice how it says may, which is your indicator for this statement being likely correct. Please notice if it said always, then it would be highly likely that the statement is wrong. So this is another way to judge whether the statement is likely correct or likely wrong whenever you are in a fix in the examination hall. Look out for words like this. When talking about probability, it's very likely that your statement is going to be correct, because probably, yes, but always and absolutely with utmost uncertainty, no. Usually that doesn't happen. All right. So this is correct. It can take the form of everyday stereotypes. Please notice the term again, can, may. All these terms are talking about possibility. Can you rule out such possibilities? No. Another thing is to look at the statement. It may take the form of everyday stereotypes. Yes, it does. In fact, it often does. How? In the form of jokes, slangs, remarks for others' religions. And these are very casual in nature, and these happen in our day-to-day life. Think about it. How often do we say, oh, such and such religion promotes violence, or the people of such and such religion are dirty, or, you know, stuff like this every time, or whatever is the time something goes off with people of some religion. So please, let's understand that it does take the form of everyday stereotypes, and it does so very casually without us even realizing and acknowledging it. Fourth, it strengthens secularism in a democracy. It strengthens. Does it? No. It is actually causing harm to secularism. It is violating the principle of secularism. So this can be eliminated. And with this, we can eliminate option number B, C and D and arrive at the correct answer, which is option A. Our final question for today: which of the following indicate persistence of caste inequalities in India? The question means, which of the following make us aware of existing caste inequalities even today? 1. Overrepresentation of upper castes in higher education and urban middle class. This is factually correct and backed by data. This is actually correct. So there is indeed overrepresentation of upper castes in higher education and urban middle class, and you can usually check it even if the sample size is fairly small. 2. High poverty among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Again, this is correct. Like I said, you can take a look around and still figure this out, but it is also backed by hard data. You know, data like data provided by NSSO or Niti Aayog. If you go and check certain reports like the multi-dimensional poverty indicators and stuff, you'll realize that this is in fact correct. Complete disappearance of caste in urban marriages. No. We just discussed that caste inequalities persist even today, and also in urban areas, although they are more prominent and more visible in rural areas. But let's say urban marriages, in urban areas, the practice of an endogamy is still prevalent. Endogamy means marrying within your own caste. So we cannot say that caste has absolutely disappeared. No. So the statement is wrong. Fourth, continued practice of untouchability despite legal prohibition. Yes. Article 17 of the Constitution abolishes untouchability. But in subtle ways, in some areas, particularly, again, I would like to draw your focus to the rural areas, it is still prevalent. It does happen. So this is correct. Now, eliminating statement 3, we get to the correct answer, which is option C. So before we move forward, I would like to draw your attention to the NCERT Online Foundation course for your UPSC Foundation, wherein you'll get 150 plus live classes for 2 years. And if you purchase this course and then get yourself enrolled in any of our offline physical centers for the IAS GS Foundation classroom course, you will receive a full fee waiver equaling the amount you've paid for the NCERT online course. If you want more details, kindly click on the link in the description box or call 87501 87501. Now on the screen for you, I have brought a practice question that we will be discussing in the upcoming video. Please send me your answers in the comments section. If you enjoyed today's session, please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.